start as far as being a foreign war correspondent? Did you was that what you started with, or?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I started as a. I begged my way into an unpaid gig with this journalist named Amy Goodman, who hosts a show called Democracy Now! And at the time,
I've seen Democracy Now!
Yeah, okay. So it was at this radio station in New York in 1997. I was like stalking her to like let me do. She either had to get a restraining order or like agree to let me come in and be like it wasn't even an internship. There was no such thing. So I started off working in radio and running errands and clipping newspaper articles, and I got sort of good at the technical side of radio.
Right.
And so actual reporters started asking me to cut their pieces for them, and it was on the old reel-to-reel tapes.
Yeah.
And so I started doing that, and then these people that I knew in 97, 98 were going to Iraq on a humanitarian delegation, and they knew that I worked in radio, and they said, "Oh, do you want to go with us?" Right. And I'd only been out of the U.S. once in my life before that, and I'm like, yeah, sure, I'm crazy enough to do that. So I begged family members to give me some money, and I think I raised about $1,500, and I went to Iraq in '98 with this humanitarian group. And from then on, the second I stepped foot in Iraq in '98, I knew that this is what I wanted to do.
Right.
And so I started off my whole sort of work as a journalist. The main thing I've tried to do is to tell stories of people who otherwise wouldn't have their stories told.
Right.
And that led me to going to Iraq, Nigeria, Yugoslavia,
right.
Yemen, Somalia.
I remember the Blackwater thing really well, because I remember you were on television all the time.
I was watching
Bill Maher, watching Rachel's show all the time, and you were there all the time. And I ended up reading your book, and I mean it was eye-opening for me, because I had just gotten out of the military at that time. And that's actually kind of the interesting thing about this movie to me. Back in 2006, I directed my first film. It was called The Hidden Agenda, which was about, I don't know if you remember, they passed what everybody was calling the torture bill back then, where you basically, the president could arrest, try, and convict anybody without. And I thought, well, if he can do all that, then the next logical step is just inside the United States assassinations. And so I wanted to explore that, And so then I see this, and I'm like, wow, look, they're really doing it. Which brings me to the first question I really wrote down, which is that a pretty good amount of this film is devoted to the targeting and then eventual killing of Anwar al-Awlaki. And you make a good case for why his killing was wrong. Whether I completely agree or not, I don't know. But I definitely agree that the killing of the son, I mean, that's beyond wrong. Right. And so it kind of becomes impossible for me to justify to myself that that's okay. And it makes you see American forces as terrorists themselves, I know that soldiers, they do bad things, and some of them even join just so that they can do bad things. I've talked to many of them that way. So I wonder, do you feel, the same way, and do you see the strikes as acts of terror that are, akin to what Al-Qaeda are doing, and are they, helping to legitimize what Al-Qaeda is doing in the Muslim world?
Yeah. Wow, there's a lot there.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's cool. I was talking to General Hugh Shelton, who's the former chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and on 9/11 he was the chair of the Joint Chiefs. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about this very issue about when we launch a cruise missile strike or a drone strike or do a night raid, and the sort of wrong people are killed, as they're called. That's what they refer to them, the wrong people, the innocent people that had nothing that weren't the targets. What's the impact of that? And General Shelton said to me quite bluntly, we have to be careful that we do not become the terrorists that we're seeking to destroy.
Right.
And so I don't think it's controversial to take on that question, because it's relative to us. People that want to bring down airliners full of civilians, very clearly that's an act of terrorism.
Absolutely.
If you live in Yemen and you're going about your business as a sheep herder or something, and your name is similar to Saeed al-Shiri, who's one of the top leaders of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, and on that basis that somebody heard that your name was that and they were wrong, they launch a cruise missile or they hit you with a hellfire strike, and your whole family is wiped out. How do you see that? I mean, how is that not an act of terror from the viewpoint of the people that live on the other side of it? It's all relative. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter.
Right. And how is it that we can't? I don't understand how Americans can't put that into. I mean, imagine if you're sitting in your house one day and then all of a sudden a bomb drops on your house and you're the only one to survive. Do you not think that you're going to go take up arms? I mean, that's
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the killing of Al-Awlaki's kid, and I know there's a vibrant debate, and I'm engaged in that debate all the time about whether or not it was justifiable to kill Anwar al-Awlaki, and I mean, I don't view al-Awlaki as a noble man at all. And
right.
I mean, he said things that I found reprehensible. In fact, one of the worst things that I think he did was to call for the killing of cartoonists who had drawn the Prophet Muhammad. And
I remember that.
They published this article. I mean, so there are things about him that and in the book I'm writing, I could get into very serious detail about the whole life of al-Awlaki. It's very difficult to do that in a 90-minute film.
Right.
But I will say this: the killing of Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki is one of the most shameful acts that President Obama has committed. If it was a mistake, as anonymous officials have said, come forward and own it, and say, we killed one of our own citizens, and this is why, and we apologize to the family. That family, they wouldn't like that, but at least they would understand. That family is an interesting bunch. Al-Awlaki was the black sheep of that family.
Right.
His father is a very prominent
like
academic.
A good man.
He is. And he loves America. The last time that I was at the al-Awlaki home in Sana'a, Nasser al-Awlaki, who's in our film, the grandfather of Abdul Rahman, pulls out this videotape from 2002. He was the alumnus of the year at New Mexico State University in 2002, and he came to accept it. And he was this very distinguished guy. And he showed me his essays for when he first came to the United States. I mean, these were people that viewed America as the shining, city on the hill.
Right.
And, what happened to Anwar al-Awlaki happened to Anwar al-Awlaki. He became radicalized. He walked across the line at some point. But this 16-year-old kid had, as you saw in the film, had an afro that his parents wanted him to cut. He listened to hip-hop music. I mean, if you look at his Facebook page, he was a normal kid who had nothing to do with his father at all. Hadn't seen him since 2009. Why on earth was he killed? Nowhere near where his father was killed. Sitting, having dinner with his cousins outside.
Right.
I've talked to people who worked on that operation from JSOC, who were in Yemen working that operation. And this isn't the film because it were conversations I had after it, but they told me, when I said, what happened there? And they said, bad information, bad intelligence. And one guy said to me, when I said, well, how do you feel about the fact that operation killed a 16-year-old American? He goes, there's a reason I'm not doing this anymore. And we have to ask ourselves, how do we look in the world when we do that? We'll kill our own teenagers in a targeted strike. It's not like he was on he was like in a Al Qaeda super camp somewhere. He was sitting outside. Anyway, so that to me that issue should be hammered home. And the only politician in this country that has said anything about this is Rand Paul, which is, it's interesting. When Rand Paul did that filibuster, no Democrats will speak up about it. No one wants to talk about Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki. It's Rand Paul, who I think is bananas crazy.
I do think he's bananas crazy, but you're right. When he did that, I was sitting there going, okay, well, maybe this guy. I thought Chris Christie was bananas crazy, but maybe this guy is coming along. He's still bananas crazy.
No, but what I'm saying.
But you're right.
Ron Paul. It's interesting. Rand Paul and Ron Paul, more Ron Paul than Rand Paul, have raised very serious questions about American foreign policy, and I wish that it wasn't overshadowed by the basket full of crazy that those guys.
I really do too.
They're raising important issues.
Yeah, because you listen to him, and I mean, it's like you watch Bill Maher, and Bill talk about it all the time, Ron Paul on his foreign policy. Right. I mean, it's just, I think he's on like Donkey Kong. I mean, it's absolutely, he's right on. But then you get into his domestic policy, and it's just like, oh well. Everybody fend for yourself. I don't know. It's terrible. But as far as the drone strikes, drones themselves, I think that they create this easy way for the American people and for the presidency and for everybody to kind of go, oh, well, it's collateral damage. It's a bomb that's dropped, the whole 9 yards. But that's why I think the first case that was in your film, that one hit me even harder.
The night raid, you mean?
The night raid, yeah. Because it showed that there was, I have this question written, but I'm thinking
just say it.
But yeah, it showed that American soldiers, they will just see somebody. It doesn't matter if they have a gun. It doesn't matter what they're doing. They can just walk out of a hut and just blow their brains out. And then they'll see two women come out and just kill them on sight. And that stuff, that to me, that's so personal. And then what they do afterwards and they did this in Iraq too. I know. I talked to a lot of friends who did this, and I had a friend that worked in, like there was a sister prison to Abu Ghraib, and he worked in the sister prison as a medic there because I was a medic, and and he said, yeah, you would see people come in all the time. They would just come in for a couple of days. You didn't know who they were. They would get tortured, and then they would leave, and you'd be like, what? And how can we not say that when we're doing this to people, taking them from their homes, killing their families, and then saying, oh, my bad, and then dropping them back in their village.
Most often not saying my bad. Most often saying nothing.
Oh, yeah, not saying anything. Just taking the blindfold off or whatever and just returning you to your village. I mean, I don't understand how that can't create harms.
It's interesting. I think that a lot of folks who were in the military going in and out of these rotations, being stop-lost, and you're back for this deployment, that deployment, multiple 10 years of just constantly being deployed, redeployed. We don't know the human costs of that, even in our own country.
I've definitely seen it firsthand, but yeah.
What I'm saying, we don't know the extent of what we're going to be paying for later. I don't mean financially.